Give her a big Texas welcome, Dr. Jennifer Golbeck.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad to be back here in Texas, especially on your centennial. I'm really honored to be here when you all are celebrating. I've talked to a lot of realtor groups, and you guys party a lot harder than they do in Florida, where I've kind of made the circuit. You know, I like to open this. I do talk to realtors a lot, and I was opening this talk by talking about how about a year and a half ago we bought a house down in Florida near Key West, and I'm a millennial and an introvert, and so if I can just like text message somebody and handle stuff myself online, I'll do that. And the realtor that we had down there was so helpful, and I would talk about how helpful that was. But apparently it was not enough for me to learn my lesson, because my husband and I decided to sell our house in Virginia in November, and his neighbor is his house from before he got married. His neighbor's like, I want to buy your house, and I'm like, we can handle this. We don't need to bring anybody in to help us. We can handle it. Oh my God, y'all. It was, she broke in at one point. She just showed up to the closing with no money, and then said she'd bring it the next day, and I'm like, you can't just change the day. And then she broke into the house and like broke some stuff, and we had to like, oh my God. And I'm like, could you just hire that realtor to take care of it? And like 15 people showed up on the first weekend, and we sold it in like a week, and it was great. And so now, I know that you all knew what you were doing, and that I didn't know what I was doing, and I just didn't know how vast the gulf was between the two. So now I am really like an evangelist for all of you from my own double personal experience. I'm sorry it took so long. So that said, I'm really sorry to say what I'm going to do for the next 45 minutes is freak the heck out of all of you, and hopefully give you a little glimmer of hope about things. Because what I'm going to talk to you about is artificial intelligence, social media, all the crazy things we can find out about people from the data that's just leaking out about you all over the place, and some of the good ways that that can be used, but also some of the really challenging, bad things that happen with this, and how you as professionals kind of balance wanting to leverage the tools that are provided to you without creeping people out and ruining the trust that they have in you. But before I jump into talking through all of that, you know, when I say I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence, some people think like Skynet from the Terminator or the Matrix, and they're like, AI is going to become self-aware and take over human civilization. And so I want to let you know that that's not a thing to worry about. AI is really dumb about a lot of things. Like, it can't tell the difference between Chihuahuas and blueberry muffins, Labradoodles and fried chicken. Somebody said, I'm going to take all those paint colors, right? So these are some actual paint color names. I'm sure you're all familiar with these. These are real paint color names. And they said, I'm going to feed the color and the name to some artificial intelligence, thousands of these colors, and then I'm going to have it pick some good paint colors and give them names. That's what it came up with. It's like really good band names. All right, so someone also decided to do this with motivational posters, right? Like the skydivers, and it says like there's no I in team. Oh, we'll skip those guys. That's what it came up with. Took y'all a second on that one. I really want to just hang that one up in my office. It's so good. So, yeah. AI, not going to take over human civilization, right? It's really dumb about a lot of things that people are very good at. The real threat that comes from artificial intelligence is that there are some things it can tell us, and then people use those things in very uninformed ways, often in incredibly unfair ways, and that can get you into a lot of trouble. It can get you into legal trouble. It can also just lead you to doing incredibly unethical things, sometimes on accident, and we're going to talk about those in the later part of the talk today. But what I want to start off doing is giving you a picture of exactly what AI can do. How many of you know this story from my awesome graphic here? A few of you. This is an older story that I'm ready to drop once everybody in the world knows it. This is from back in like 2007, 2008. New York Times did a story about this dad in Minnesota who walks into his local Target. He has a flyer that came in the mail addressed to his 15-year-old daughter. And the dad is like in a rage. He gets the manager over and he's like, "You sent this flyer to my 15-year-old daughter? It has coupons for maternity clothes and baby bottles and diapers. Do you want her to get pregnant? Why would you do this?" The manager has no idea what he's talking about because like Target headquarters sends the flyers, but he promises to look into it. A couple weeks later, the manager calls the dad back and he's like, "I just wanted to apologize." And the dad says, "I owe you an apology because it turns out my 15-year-old is pregnant, but Target found out before she told us." How does Target do that? So Target analyzes everything everyone's ever bought at Target, right? If you go to Target and you use a loyalty card to get discounts, or if you pay with credit and debit cards, even if you mix them up, it's very easy to piece that together into a history of everything you've ever bought. And millions of people do their shopping at Target. So Target has decades worth of purchases for millions of people. Now they want to know if someone's pregnant because there's only 2 times in people's lives when they change their shopping habits. When they buy a house, you all know that, and when they have a baby. And so Target's thinking is if we can find out when women are pregnant, we can send them coupons for maternity clothes or whatever, get them to stop in and they'll see we have all this other stuff, and so they're more likely to come back here once they have the baby. That's why they want to do this. So that's not too nefarious. And so they have all this data. Well, you don't need artificial intelligence to look at people's purchase history and know when they have a baby, right? How many of you have kids? Oh, most of you. I mean, if you don't have kids, when that first baby comes, there's a big spike in diapers and wipies and all this other stuff. And so you can just look at that. All right, here's obviously someone had a baby. And then let's just go back 7, 8 months and look at what they were buying then. And that's going to be purchases that tell us you have a woman who's early in her pregnancy. So what are the purchases that tell you that? You have a woman early in her pregnancy. Pregnancy test would win on Family Feud. That is the most popular answer I get when I ask this question. It's a trick question because it's not any individual thing, it turns out. They talked to a guy in this data analytics group at Target, and he said, one of the strongest indicators is if a woman buys these 3 things: an extra bottle of lotion, a handbag that's big enough to double as a diaper bag, but not like an actual diaper bag, just a big handbag, and brightly colored rugs. Right, so you're in line and the lady has like cocoa butter and a giant purse and a blue rug, and you're like, she's totally pregnant. Maybe now, right, I've corrupted your future shopping trips. Why those things? I mean, all right, the lotion maybe makes sense, maybe the purse, but you're not decorating a nursery when you're like 6 weeks pregnant. I have no idea why that rug is on there. And we don't know why. This is a really important thing about artificial intelligence, is that you very rarely get a why. You just get an answer. Right? As computer scientists, the question that we answer as a field is, can you compute X, whatever? Can you compute this thing? Can you compute if a woman's early in her pregnancy? We sure can. Can we tell you why we know that? Nope. We tried that. We spent about 15 years trying to explain the output of these algorithms, and we just gave up because we can't do it. And so you don't get any insight. You just get an answer, but Target thought that was fine. But what ends up happening is that you can't hide from those algorithms when you don't know the why. If you want to keep your pregnancy to yourself, you can't say, well, I'm going to avoid buying a blue rug at Target because that's going to tell them. You would never know that the blue rug is going to telegraph that. And so it makes it very hard to keep this incredibly personal information to yourself when the algorithms are operating on these statistical patterns that can change week to week. They just rebuild their models, and you never know what you have to keep to yourself or avoid. So this is older technology. We're starting to get very good at predicting these kinds of personal attributes. So we can look at things that you do online and find out all kinds of stuff: race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, if you drink or smoke or use drugs, if your parents got divorced before you were 21, what your IQ test is, what your politics are. We can easily compute all those things about you using very simple data that we get about you and running it through an algorithm because we have access to data for tons of people, and we just put you in the context of all those people and figure this out. But that's sort of old technology in the computer science world, right? We finished with that like 5, 6 years ago. What we're starting to get really good at is figuring things out that will be true about you in the future, even if you don't know it yet. For example, One of the first studies in this space, oh, we don't need this yet. One of the first studies in this, we'll get there, it's creepy. Okay, so researchers at Cornell, they wanted to look at your list of Facebook friends and pick which person was your spouse or your significant other. Who in here is not on Facebook? All right, look around, these like 5 people are gonna look real smug for like 20 minutes. Do any of you only have a flip phone? Sometimes there's like one old guy in the back of the room who's like very proud of his flip phone. All right, if you have a smartphone, you're totally like in my web. Okay, but so most of you are on Facebook, and so you know that you can like list your family members on there, and so they were looking at who's the person you're in a relationship with. The only thing they looked at was, here's your list of friends, not even names. Just imagine we number them like 1 through 300, and then which of them know each other. So maybe your friend number 1 is also connected to friend number 15, 37, whatever. So they've got your personal social network. And so if you had to make a guess which person in that little network is your significant other, maybe you'd guess the person you have the most friends in common with. That's a pretty good guess, and that actually works well a lot of the time. But these researchers wanted to do better than that, and so they said, all right, we're going to come up with a new measure. And what they came up with was this thing they call social dispersion, which is this very fancy term for a really straightforward idea. If you think about your social life, online or offline, you tend to have pretty distinct groups of friends, right? You have people you went to high school with, maybe people you went to college with, people you go to church with, people on your sports team. I definitely have this. I visualize my network with my students, and I moved every time I did something different. So I've got a big group of cousins from my Catholic family and high school friends, college friends. I play ice hockey on a men's team, so there's like 20 dudes who are all connected off in the corner that don't know anybody else, which is fine. So I've got all these social circles. And social dispersion says your significant other is the person who's connected to the greatest number of those groups. So this totally works for me. I got married 5 or 6 years ago. My husband is 10 years older than me, born and raised in Germany, just became an American citizen, different school than me, different career than me. We actually have very few friends in common. But he's connected to all those different groups, right? He met cousins at a wedding, met the high school friend who came to town, knows some of the hockey guys. And so he has this really good coverage of all the parts of my life, even though we don't have a ton of people in our shared friend group. That's what this is getting at. So it turns out that is a great way to guess who your significant other is. It's right like 75% of the time. And so these researchers were pleased with that, but they're engineers. They want to do better, right? So they did all this analysis, and a couple months went by, and they said, well, maybe we can refine it. They went back and grabbed more data about those people. And what they discovered was, if they had guessed wrong for you in the first place, that you were 50% more likely to have broken up in those 2 months than if they guessed right. So essentially, they can tell you if your relationship is going to last when you're in it, and you think it's going fine. And they didn't mention it in the paper, but they can tell you who a good alternative is, right? I don't think it's going to work out with this guy, but this one over here could be a good choice. And this got a lot of us thinking about, could we do this on purpose? Could we analyze this data and predict things about people's future? One example from my lab that we did is that we were looking at alcoholism on Twitter. So we went onto Twitter. We found everyone who announced they were going to their first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Now this takes the anonymous part out of it. I don't know how that messed up our data. But whatever, future work. And so we filtered out all the jokes. These were people who really were like, I'm drinking too much, I'm going to my first AA meeting tomorrow. And then we followed what they posted after that to see if they were sober 90 days later. And we made sure they said explicitly. So it could be a year after that, they celebrated 1 year of sobriety. We knew they made it that long. It could be a week later, they were complaining about being hungover at work. We know they didn't make it 90 days. So we had explicit data for hundreds of people. And then we took everything they did on Twitter up until they announced they were going to that first meeting, and we built an algorithm that would analyze that and guess, will they be sober in 90 days? It's right 85% of the time. So on the day you say, I'm going to go to my first AA meeting tomorrow, I can push a button and tell you if it's going to work with pretty good accuracy. Yeah, is this good or bad? We built it to give some insight. To say why, right? A lot of these algorithms don't tell you a why, and I find that very frustrating. And so we built this to say, hey, it looks like you have a difficult time coping with stressful situations. That's really common among alcoholics, and it's also something that very clearly comes through in your language. We can detect that by looking at what you post online. So maybe here's a kind of therapy that you can get for a couple months to help you find a better way to deal with stress, and that's going to improve your chances. Or your social circle's full of people who talk about drinking all the time, so maybe you want to switch that up. Stuff that addiction researchers know about. But I always like to think, what is the worst thing people can do with technology I build? Because I have always underestimated the evil things people would do with stuff I created. One of the first studies in this space is one that we did where we could predict people's personality traits by analyzing their Facebook profiles. And my main worry is, like, maybe if I apply for a job, a company would use that to determine if they're going to hire me. What actually happened was Cambridge Analytica, which is a thing you may have heard of from the last election. They interviewed that guy who stole 86 million Americans' personal data and used it to influence who they voted for in the election. And he's like, yeah, Jen Golbeck's work was very influential. And I was like, I told you not to be evil with this. And so, all right, I maybe screwed up democracy a little bit. I'd better think about how people could use this AA thing in the wrong way. And I used to be embarrassed to share my answer, which is the worst thing I think someone could do is that in a lot of states, if you get pulled over for your first DUI, you have the option of going into treatment or going to jail. So let's just run the algorithm. If the algorithm says it'll work, you can go to AA, and if the algorithm says it won't work, you can go to jail, right? You could imagine a judge or a legislator saying that. I've had dozens of people come up to me after talks like this and say, I think that's a great idea. We should totally do that. It's not a good idea, in case you secretly are having that thought. This algorithm is wrong 15% of the time, and it's pessimistic. When it's wrong, it tends to say people will not get sober when they actually will. So you're sending 15% of people to jail instead of treatment when treatment would work. These algorithms also tend to be biased in all kinds of ways, and we don't really know what way it is here, but there's something. First is people who are saying on Twitter that they're going to AA. Okay, so that's problematic. But a lot of these algorithms are built on top of places where society has biases and we know about them. And the AI doesn't cancel those biases out, it just replicates those, right? AI has this veneer of objectivity because it's math. It analyzes the data and it gives you an answer. So it can't be racist, it can't be sexist. But what AI actually does is it looks at what decisions people made from data, and it learns to make the same decision as people made. So if people are racist, if people are sexist, the AI just learns to replicate that. One algorithm that people pitch me all the time, right? I get all these startup ideas pitched at me. They're like, we're going to use an algorithm to determine who to hire for jobs. We're going to take the people in our company who have been successful, analyze their resumes, and then for the people who apply, we'll have the AI analyze their resumes and pick people who are going to be like people who are successful. What do you end up if you do that? Get a bunch of white guys, right? No, the white guys in the room don't think this is funny, but it's true. So people don't listen to me. And Amazon was like, we're going to do this. We're going to build an algorithm like this to hire software engineers that will do exactly that. Look at the people who are good software engineers, analyze that. They spent 3 years on this project. So imagine the amount of money that Amazon spent with a team spending 3 years building this. That algorithm was so sexist that they had to scrap the whole project. It learned what the women's colleges were. Because it's like, I don't know, it doesn't say female on your resume, right? But anybody who went to these schools does not look like someone that we want to hire. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to take out women's tennis team, women's chess club. It still could identify every female and say, not someone that we want to hire. Because software engineering is a male-dominated field, there's huge bias against women in the field. And so it learns men are what software engineers look like, and any resume. Remember, we're good at finding out your gender from looking at your data, right? You can pick out gender by looking at resumes, and it decides not to hire it. So they scrapped millions of dollars wasted. They had to scrap this project. And this kind of thing comes into your space as well. So a company that will not be named that was giving out mortgages in the lead up to the mortgage crisis had to pay a huge government fine because they were investigated by the city of Los Angeles, and they had an algorithm. You'd feed your data in. It would tell you, do you get a subprime mortgage, do you get a regular mortgage? And it was sending African Americans into subprime mortgages 1.5 times as often as white people with exactly the same credit report, Hispanics twice as often. So how does it do that if you don't they know you can't give mortgages based on race, right? Race isn't an input, but we can find out all these demographic traits very easily from your data. This algorithm had zip code as an input. Well, you all know better than me that zip code maps closely to race in an awful lot of this country. And so if historically human mortgage lenders are seeing a black person or a Latino person in front of them and sending them to a subprime mortgage more than a white person, the algorithm says, all right, I don't know why, but this person needs a subprime mortgage, and if, hey, it's people in the zip code, fine. So it learns what race is, even though you're not telling it what race is, to the point where you have a provably, legally racist algorithm that gets you a fine. And these are the kinds of things that you need to keep in mind when you're using these. They're not some objective, mathematical, perfect analysis of the data. They're reflecting human decision-making back at you, and sometimes that can be great, and sometimes it can be really bad. All right, so we're at the end of Freak Out Phase 1. How y'all doing? Ready for Phase 2? Okay. All right, so all of this works only if I can get access to a whole bunch of data about you. So can I? Of course, right? You all sort of know it at this point, but it's way worse than you think it is. So let's talk about that. I want to start with this video. Again, this is sort of an older video. This is around from 2011-12. This was a website, unfortunately, that's no longer active, but you could go there, log in with Facebook, and it would make you an interactive movie. I'm going to show you the movie. This is the one that it made for me. When this first came out, I was like, I'm not going to bother because I have like the world's strictest Facebook privacy settings. Everything is locked down. The box is checked that says apps cannot use my data. Only a handful of friends can see what I post. I'm like, it won't get anything. I'm not going to bother. But everybody kept talking about it, and I'm like, fine, it's my job to know about this stuff. I will try it just so I can talk about it. This is the video that it made. So I'm going to play this for you. It's about 1.5 minutes, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so it starts with this connect with Facebook. That's like log in with Google or Twitter, which you may have seen. All right, so that's me. These are all my friends' posts and comments in the middle. My whole friend list on the side there. All my photos. All right, so here it's pulling my location when I made the video. Notice my picture taped on the dashboard? So that's creepy, right? I mean, obviously the context is creepy, but also I thought this wasn't going to get any of my data. It got all my data. And I went back in and I looked. The box is there. Apps cannot access my data. This is an app. How did it get all my data? It turns out that box is there exactly because of the Cambridge Analytica stuff. By default, if you and I are friends on Facebook and I install an app, that app that I installed can get all of your data, even if you didn't install it. So the box is there to keep apps that your friends install from getting your data. But if you install it, they figure you just want to override all of your privacy settings and give it everything, which is what happened here. But this is like old news that this stuff happens. y'all have smartphones. Does anybody just have a flip phone? I didn't think in this room that would be true. Yeah, all right, so you'll have smartphones. They are just little spy devices walking around with you. How many of you have had this experience? You're like out to dinner, your phone is sitting on the table, and you're like, yeah, maybe for spring break we should go to Costa Rica. You don't write it down, you don't look it up, and like the next day you have Costa Rican tourism ads. These are because a lot of apps will passively turn on the microphone, listen in, pick up on keywords, and then those get shared with advertisers to then target ads at you. Why is this legal? Someone is thinking. Why is that not like wiretapping? Because like the terms of service say like, we'll monitor your usage to improve your interaction with our service, and like that covers it. So they're just allowed to do whatever they want. So yeah, that's one that now kind of everyone's starting to recognize. But all sorts of settings kind of can get overridden. So some people with Android devices are like, well, I have a setting that tells apps they can't use my microphone, so I'm fine. No, you are not. So your phone has an accelerometer in it, which is a device that can tell which direction it's pointing, like a compass. It can tell if it's tilted. If you play games where you kind of tilt it, it does that. This is just built in. Any app can access the accelerometer. So there's studies that show, you know, when you talk, it makes vibrations. Well, the accelerometer picks that up, and artificial intelligence can turn those vibrations into the words that you're saying, because the words make different vibrations. So even if you physically ripped the microphone out, making your phone no longer a phone, we still can understand what you're saying and use it to target you with information. I'm doing a little experiment now to try to catch some of this happening, and by accident I discovered that your phones also can track your location even if you have it turned off. So I have my phone sitting down in Key West. I have them like connected to networks, location services turned off, connected to networks in New Orleans, so it doesn't look like they're in Key West. But I was getting all these Key West related ads, and I'm like, they obviously know where I am. And that's because the apps can see the Wi-Fi signals that your phone sees, and there's a database of Wi-Fi signals that map them to GPS coordinates. So even if you turn off location tracking, any app can just see all the Wi-Fi signals that you connect to and then literally follow you around as though you have a GPS on. It's way worse than this, though. Okay. Let's talk about Facebook. So Facebook has a feature, as most of you know, called like People You May Know, which is like a friend suggestion, like, oh, you may want to be friends with this person. Facebook loves this because it keeps people on Facebook for more time. And so someone found 2 patents that Facebook filed to help suggest friends to you. So one of them will use the GPS to see if you're standing next to someone. This is if you have the Facebook app installed. So if I'm standing here, you're standing there, maybe we know each other, right? But not necessarily. Excuse me, if we're like in a bar and it's happy hour, we could be touching for half an hour, talking to different people and not know. Well, Facebook knows that, so they use that accelerometer to see if we're facing towards each other or away from each other. If we face towards each other, then it will suggest it as friends. So like if I'm at the bar and the dude next to me will not leave me alone, I will show up in his suggested friends the next day because he was talking at me for 20 minutes. Yeah, not a lot of women working at Facebook on this, by the way. One other feature they have is, so imagine after this, so we took a selfie over here at the beginning, not you, the guy next to you. I took a selfie with this guy before we started, but we're not friends on Facebook, so you may post that selfie online, and you may take a selfie with somebody else and post it online. None of us are Facebook friends together. But Facebook can analyze the pattern of dust and lens scratches on your phone camera and know that me and whoever else had our pictures taken by the same camera at the same time, and then suggest that we should be friends with each other. All right, 8 people who don't have Facebook accounts, let me tell you about how you actually have Facebook accounts. Facebook maintains what they call shadow profiles for anyone who doesn't sign up, because it's very obvious when there is a person missing from a network. So you have friends. I mean, do any of you who don't have Facebook also not have friends? Yeah. Nobody ever says yes to that one. All right, so you have friends. They presumably have you in their contact list on their phone. And so when they install the Facebook app on their phone, which a lot of them will have done, it pulls your contact list whether you tell it to or not. So they have the contact list, and so for everybody who has you in their phone book, Facebook's like, okay, this person's in the phone book. Well, you have a phone number, you have an email address, that's a unique identifier, right? So now they say, all right, 50 people know a person with this phone number, and they know your name because that's in the contact list, and your email, and maybe your street address, and maybe some pictures of you if I put your picture in next to it. They have a great facial recognition algorithm that's going to see the picture and then match it up with all the other pictures of you that other people have posted, right? So you're in a group photo. They know now that you're in that group photo. You're the person with this phone number that knows these people, and they found you in these pictures. And using that same kind of stuff that we talked about, they can fill out all your demographics. They can figure other people you know, and they can see like, hey, here's a bunch of Texas Realtors that you're connected to. Maybe you want to join the Texas Realtor Facebook group that they're all part of. And so if you ever just give in and sign into Facebook, what you're going to find is that your profile is complete. And it's going to suggest 20 groups for you to join: your church, your high school, your college, the Texas Realtors group, all sorts of other places, because your social connections are enough to fill that picture out about you. So you're not safe. All right, that's freak out stage number 2. Are you good? Okay, it's going to get a little better before it gets worse. Okay, so it's not all bad, I promise. A lot of these algorithms under the hood, it's exactly the same math as Netflix uses to recommend movies to you, Amazon uses to recommend shows or stuff to buy. That's not creepy. Isn't that creepy that Amazon's like, hey, maybe you want to watch House of Cards, right? Why is it less creepy when Amazon or Netflix does it? There's a good answer to this. It's because we know why they have our data. We know why Netflix knows everything we've watched on Netflix. Like, of course they do. Of course Amazon knows stuff we've bought from Amazon, right? So we know where the data came from. There's transparency there about the data. And we understand what the algorithms are doing. They want us to buy more stuff or watch more stuff. So there's nothing creepy about the fact that Netflix wants to know stuff that we want to watch. These are actually pretty helpful algorithms, because if you just had to go to Netflix and dig through everything, you probably would get bored and leave. These are also incredibly helpful for these companies. Amazon says 35% of their revenue is a result of their algorithm that recommends stuff. Think about how much money Amazon makes. 35% of that is from this algorithm. Netflix says their recommender system is worth $1 billion. So they're making huge amounts of money from it, and people generally are not creeped out by these algorithms and find them helpful, because you realize stuff that you actually should buy, you find stuff that you want to watch on Netflix. So it can be good. And most of us who build these algorithms want to make them because they can do good things. They're being used in healthcare in incredible ways. So I have colleagues working with the Department of Defense, analyzing text posted by soldiers who are coming back from combat zones, who are in medical centers for PTSD, to identify when their risk of suicide goes up. This is really helpful. Those soldiers are consenting to have their text analyzed, so it's not like it's creepily being collected in the background. It's being used by a knowledgeable practitioner to come up with interventions to help them. Another research group just came up with an algorithm that is able to look at brain scans and diagnose people who will develop schizophrenia 6 years before a human doctor could actually tell them that. It's amazing. It's right like 98% of the time, which are numbers that you can really only get to in like a clinical medical space where you have very straightforward stuff. And that's a point where, of course, we don't have a cure for Alzheimer's, but we have new treatments that are really only effective if you start them before you have advanced symptoms. So now, before you're really even showing any symptoms of Alzheimer's, these brain scans can be analyzed by the AI, pick up on signals that people can't see, and give you the opportunity to be treated. That's why a lot of us are working in this space. There's profoundly, transformatively good things that can happen from this, but most of it you're running into is creepy stuff stealing your data and doing unethical things with it. We like to call this surveillance capitalism. I hope it is a thing that in 20 years, people's kids are going to go like, you all really did that? That's terrible. I can't imagine living in that world like they can't imagine living in a world with rabbit ears on your TV, right? I want it to be that foreign. Okay, so can we do that? Can we get to that space? And in the meantime, what can you do? Because these tools are going to start coming to you. Do any of you know that you're using them yet, these kinds of personal analytics? So that's okay. Let me show you one. This is a tool called Crystalnose. So you can do a free trial of this if you want. It's crystal like a glass, nose with a K. This is sort of an initial version of their system. I just got an email from them that said I could use their tool to help my romantic relationship, which we'll talk about after we explain what it does. It's a Google Chrome plugin that works with Gmail. So you install it, so you start an email, type in someone's email address, and it pulls up a profile of them that looks like this. They're going to help you write a good email to this person based on a personality profile that they have developed. We don't know where the data came from. They won't tell us. We don't know how their algorithm figures it out. So that automatically puts you in creepy land. But okay, so this is their sample guy from their website. There's 81 of these different profiles, so he's persuasive, takes calculated risks, and then the text is small. This is just to sort of show you what it looks like. What this says is, here's how to write a good email to this person. He's direct, he'll respond quickly if you keep the email as short as possible, even if it seems impolite. And then that middle, those green things, those are phrases to use, like, I disagree, or you should take the lead. The bottom stuff is things that you should avoid, like, here's the plan, or formal greetings. Okay, you close this. You start typing your email. Type a sentence, you hit a period at the end of the sentence, it analyzes your sentence, and if you did not follow their rules, they highlight it like a spelling error, and if you right-click, it tells you how to rephrase the sentence to be more in line with their suggestions. Is it good or bad? I think it's super creepy. I get very mixed reactions to this. I'm kind of like this guy, right? I want short emails. I don't want anybody to tell me that they're the most trusted whatever. Just like get to the point and tell me fast and get it done with. But if you sent me an email using this tool, I would feel sort of manipulated. I would feel like I can't really trust you, that you're using some tool that has stolen. I didn't give them my data. I didn't say they could do this, but they got it from somewhere and they came up with this profile that I can't even see, and you're using it to send me stuff. This is the space that I want you to be thinking about, because professionally, it's the space that you're going to be working in. This is a Google Chrome plugin, right? Google has the ability to do this. They could introduce a tool like this tomorrow. Just pop it into Gmail if you're already using it. A lot of services that you use are going to start introducing these kind of personal analytic tools just as new menu options and tools that you're already using. Get some additional insight. Get some extra feedback. Are you going to use it or not? If you use something like this with me, I'm not going to trust you. If my realtor in Florida, when I was buying my house, I found out he was emailing me with a thing like this, I'd be like, no, we're not friends anymore. And this is a really important thing to keep in mind, especially for your industry. Trust is so important in those interpersonal relationships. And if you screw that trust up by using a tool that creeps people out, you're going to mess up your business. So how do you make decisions about which of these tools do you use? You can see why this would be useful. Do you use it or not? So here's some things I want you to think about. One, and we've researched this in my lab, so this isn't just me saying, this is me having done studies with thousands of people. Thing number one is that people get creeped out when they don't have control over the data. These people, I don't know where they got my data from. Netflix, I know exactly how Netflix got my data. I'm fine with Netflix, I'm not okay with this. So you need transparency and consent at every step, and step one is the data. If a company's offering you a tool, ask them where they got the data from. If they tell you, you can analyze that. If they're like, well, we bought their target purchase history from a data broker, which is a thing you can do, you go, do I want to use a tool where my clients don't know that I have their purchase history or that that influenced it? I mean, you can make that decision. But you need to ask that question, where did the data come from? And if they won't tell you, that should be a red flag number one. Because thing number two is, would people have consented to you having access to that data or an algorithm that uses it? So if you came to me and you're like, Jen, here's this tool. They bought your data from these spooky data brokers that have thousands of data points about you, and they use it to find stuff out about you. Are you okay with that? I'd probably say no. And so you want to think about, like, would a reasonable person say yes or no to this? There's always going to be a spectrum, but think about yourself. Would you be okay with it? Ask some of your friends. If you can't get answers to those questions, that's a red flag that you're in a bad space. The next thing is the algorithms. How does the algorithm work? They need to be transparent about it, and most of them are not because they don't really even know. Right? Those algorithms that I told you about, Amazon trying to hire people, super sexist. unnamed bank that was sending people to subprime mortgages super racist. And we know that a lot of these algorithms have these problems. So facial recognition algorithms, right? They see a picture of you, they can identify you. You've seen these in the news lately, right? It's a story that's being covered. There's companies that are trying to sell these tools, especially to law enforcement. Amazon is talking about, well, do we use our facial recognition tool and pair it up with like your Ring doorbell? And so when someone comes to your door, hey, we can cross-reference that against offender databases and tell you if the person at your door is a criminal. Is that a good idea? It is not a good idea. Okay, so the ACLU has done tests on this. They took all the members of the California legislature and they fed their pictures to this algorithm. It was wrong about 30% of them, mostly the black legislators. So that's really problematic, right? I had an argument with some guy at a talk like this. He's like, I think it's a great idea. I'm like, people are gonna die. Like, people legitimately are gonna die if you're coming up on me and I'm really worried and it says you're an offender and it's wrong, especially if you're a person of color and it's wrong, somebody is gonna die. It's a bad idea to be deploying this technology when we know it's biased, we know it's wrong a lot of the time. And these things are out there. I mean, that technology is out there and commercially being used at this point. The problem is that we don't even know how to check for that because you can't just look at the internals of the algorithm and see what it's doing. It's mysterious in there. There's no regulation over this right now. So I suspect in the next 5-ish years, depending on what happens politically, we may start seeing some regulation, especially in already regulated spaces, that say you need to be able to audit these algorithms, to feed them a ton of examples and see, are they systematically making racially biased decisions, making sexist decisions. But we don't know that right now. So you kind of have to be the arbiter. Are you going to use this tool? Is it biased in any way? I mean, and does it matter in this case? The worst thing, you send a bad email, like maybe that's okay, right? But you need to think about, how do you audit it? Are they going to let you do your own tests? Have they done their own checks internally? If you're using this especially for making housing decisions, is that a good idea? You need to be able to check this. And so that's the same step of kind of vetting that you need to do, consent and transparency. So you can go to people and be like, hey, I'm using this algorithm. It's going to help me help you find a house or find a mortgage. I've checked it. It checks out with me, but let's talk through it. Here's where they got the data from. Here's how it works. Here's how the results work. It looks pretty solid to me. Are you cool with it? If you're not willing to do that, it means you probably shouldn't be using it. And if you're not getting those answers from the companies that are providing the tools, it also probably means you shouldn't be using it. Because ultimately, at the heart of this, what matters is that you're maintaining a trusted relationship with your clients. And if you're not willing to take those steps to protect their data, to protect their privacy, to protect their obscurity, they shouldn't trust you. And so these are steps that you can take until we get a regulatory space that kind of catches up with the tremendous power of these algorithms. And so, is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Maybe. We're starting to see some of those regulations come into place. Europe obviously has GDPR. California just passed a very positive privacy law that came into effect this year. We're likely to see some federal legislation in that space. Will that solve all the problems? Absolutely not. You need to be making these kind of steps yourself. I'm happy to talk more about this. That's my contact information. It was great talking to all of you, and I think we have time for questions. Is that right? Great. And so I'm happy to take questions from all of you. I see some mics in the aisles, and I'm happy to answer anything from like really professional questions to like, I'm freaked out about my 13-year-old on Snapchat. I can talk about that too. Or, I mean, if you're freaked out yourself about Snapchat. Thank you. Go ahead. I think they want you to use the mic there.
So do you know of any real estate companies that are already using this? I mean, I know there are a lot of them that probably are, but if you're aware of them, can you tell me how they're using it?
So I have not talked to anyone who is using these so far. I've talked to a lot of realtors. You know, I've made the circuits around a few states. I've been to most of the national realtor conferences, talking about exactly the stuff. You guys saw me, you know, when I was here for the brokers conference. No one so far has come up to me. The closest thing I've heard, and again, I'm not in your industry, so I apologize if I speak wrong about this, but there are companies that are developing tools that can tell you, like, are you at a point where it's good for me to contact you about selling your house? They get a little morbid in the other way, like, your relative just died and you probably inherited their house. Is this a good time for me to reach out and see if you want help selling it? I mean, like, that's just so sensitive, right? It's not really getting personal in the same way. I haven't talked to any realtors like showing these examples and stuff who are using this yet. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot of places are really concerned about it. I've done some consulting with individual like realtor associations about, you know, how do we implement this if we want to, but it's not widely used in your industry yet, which frankly I think is good. I mean, it's a sort of conservative industry, and I think in this space at least it serves you all well. Yeah, you first and then you, okay?
Is there a way to cut off some of this tracking that goes on our phones? I know we can do the location and all those good things, but is there some kind of way that with our providers we can cut off some of that?
Some of it. Yeah, I just spent like 12 hours putting guidelines on this together. So this is not to like tout myself, but I did, so there's a company called The Great Courses, and they do these sort of like continuing education things. Just last week, we dropped a thing on protecting your personal data, which is like me talking about this stuff for 6 hours. And a lot of it is on that question. So if you want the long answer, you can get it on Audible or online. The short answer is, yeah, install tracker blockers in your browser and on your phone. I use one called Disconnect, or Privacy Pro, and the company is Disconnect. I don't have any commercial relationship with them. I just really love it. The Washington Post did a great article last fall where one of the journalists wanted to see how much he was being tracked. And so this app allows you to see every tracker. You can see a list of it. He checked it just at night, right, when he wasn't using the phone. And over a week, I think there were 4,500 trackers that sent data about him off his phone. It's crazy. So you can see all of it. You can block it. I find it really useful. There's some games that I can't play well anymore because most games are just there to harvest data about you off your phone anyway. But this company also provides a VPN. So for those of you who are not savvy about these things, VPN is a virtual private network. It basically just encrypts everything coming off your phone so people can't snoop that data. They can't intercept it. Your internet service provider can't intercept it. It's a great protection measure. You should use one of those if you're using any public Wi-Fi. If you Google my name in VPN online, you'll find instructions on how to do it. Just make sure you pay for it. I pay for theirs. I think it's $20 a year. It's super affordable. That's another good way to do it. They also have browser extensions. So I use that same one, Privacy Pro, and another one called Ghostery on my browser, and that prevents that kind of tracking. So it's not perfect, but it does stop a lot of the really surreptitious data collection. Hey.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Question about intelligent homes.
Yeah.
Everything from Google Home to Alexa. Our home is so intelligent now I can lock the door remotely, open it, turn on lights, turn off lights. When you get ready to sell these homes, what are some of the processes, or is there one way to clean what the previous owner had?
Oh, that's such a good
because
question.
do we leave this stuff there, or do we take it back to what it was before it was installed? My other question is, I'm constantly getting things from Amazon. I think Amazon's trying to go into real estate, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, why not,
So
right?
they're selling, you know, be the first to claim your zip code. So I wonder, I've got friends that are saying, get rid of your Alexa, which I'm addicted to Alexa. Get rid of it. They're listening to you at night.
How many of you have a surveillance device in your house, like an Alexa? I don't have one in my house. I wouldn't go to your house if you had one. I would make you unplug it. They 100% are listening to you.
Oh,
of
come
course
on.
they are. Oh my gosh.
Come
okay,
on.
how many of you have like a Nest? Do you know they spy on you? You just need to go Google what has come out. Like all of these, yes, they're just collecting all this stuff and then people can get it. Oh, it's not even a little bit. No, it's very bad. It depends what your preferences are. I mean, I talk to people who are like, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm not doing anything interesting. If they want to like take video of me in my house, I'm fine with it. If they want to listen in, I'm fine with it. Look, I mean, I use Amazon to buy stuff. they're not great stewards of data. So, as an example, GDPR, the European privacy law, it gives you the right to go to any company and demand that they give you all the data they have about you, both directly collected and stuff from algorithms. You can do a lot of this in the US now, but you can do it with any company in Europe. And so some guy in Germany went to Amazon, and he had an Alexa or whatever their thing is, and he's like, send me all my data, including all the recordings that you have stored. And so they send him 1,500 recordings of somebody else. And he's like, hey, you sent me recordings of somebody else. And they just didn't respond. And he tried again, they didn't respond. And so he went to some journalists, and he's like, they sent me 15 recordings of somebody else. And so the journalist sat down with him and listened to them. Some of them were like the dude in the shower, talking to his girlfriend. They figured out who it was. It's really easy to figure out who you are from those recordings. And they called the guy, and they're like, hey, is this you? They played him the recordings, and he's like, it sure is me. And they posted a story. And then Amazon had a lot to say about it, how it was really just a one-time lapse, and they were very sorry about it. I certainly would not trust a company with a video camera or an audio device in my house that's actively recording me when they're accidentally just sending that data all over the place. But that's me, right? I'm very conservative about privacy. I don't think you're dumb or bad if you don't care about this sort of thing. But they absolutely, like all the things you fear about those absolutely is happening. And your question is a great one about what do you do when you leave that behind? I mean, I think if you go into a house that has those, especially like if I'm looking to buy a house, I want it disclosed. So, you know, I've been renovating this house we bought in Florida. We had to replace the air conditioner, and they wanted to put a smart thermostat. And I'm like, no, this is my $13 thermostat that does not connect to the internet. You know, people should have that option. And I think it's really important, and we are getting better about this in the US really just in the last year, to look at how do you delete that past data. Because potentially if I move into your house and you had a Nest in there, I can go back and I can look at all that stuff that comes with it. So GDPR, which is sort of copied by the California law, does say that you have a right to demand this stuff be deleted. And so it should be something as owners of a house that's being sold to go through and demand that be deleted, so they're not leaving that behind to the next owners. But it's hard.
One more.
I was going to say, I saw you standing there. Okay, you get a quick question.
Yes. Snapchat. Could you please? I do have the 13 years old.
You're worried about the 13-year-old on Snapchat. Snapchat's surprisingly secure. So I use it. My dogs are famous on the internet, and I post Snapchat videos of them. You know, it's not perfect. They technically can keep some stuff, but it seems like they don't keep a ton. It disappears, so it generally is much more secure and protected than a lot of other stuff. For these sorts of questions, like I'm really worried about like my kids on social media, so much of it really comes down to, parenting stuff. Like kids, they don't understand risk in the way that we do, but they are faced with this incredibly powerful thing that can keep their bad decisions around. And there's not so much a technological solution to that. It's much more a kind of, if your kid's 13, you should be able to go in and see their Snapchat, right? If they're 15, that's maybe a little bit old. You got to draw those privacy boundaries. But overall, I wouldn't worry too much. They're going to do stupid stuff one way or another. And if they do it on Snapchat where it disappears as opposed to on Facebook, you're in a pretty good place. Okay. Thank you. Oh, thank you.